recently published a paper on the like-for-like principle, and that's the idea that to reach net zero emissions in a stable way, the carbon that we remove from the atmosphere should match the type of emissions that we're trying to counter. And to do this properly, we need to consider the pool where these emissions originate from, how long they tend to stick around in the atmosphere, and what's their equivalent volume in CO2. And so for permanent CDR, the picture is quite clear. So here we know that we need to really scale up significantly, firstly to balance any remaining fossil emissions that we might have at net zero, and then also to tackle historical fossil emissions, so to put ourselves in this net negative emissions phase. For temporary CDR, the picture is actually the same, but it's less clear to most people because the current policies and incentives that we have, they don't really reflect this situation. So with our paper out on biogenic emissions today, Carbon Gap is taking the first step to show that now and in the future we need temporary removals, and we need to look at how policy can incentivize us to create more temporary removals. We're using the term biogenic emissions here to really zoom in on those greenhouse gas emissions that are caused by human activity, but that come from the burning or the breakdown of organic materials. So things like plants, soils, food, or other things that were recently living. And we also include here greenhouse gases that are produced by microorganisms. So for example, coming from different farming practices or livestock practices, and also from the warming of wetlands. Biogenic emissions are a distinct group of emissions from fossil fuel emissions, and like I said, according to the like-for-like principle, they need to be balanced using different methods. Right now, there's a lot more fossil emissions than anthropogenic biogenic emissions, but that's likely not going to be the case in the future. So currently we have this kind of mismatch because most of the removals that we're doing are temporary nature-based methods, and this makes sense for countering biogenic emissions, but there's only a small amount of permanent carbon dioxide removal that's being deployed right now, even though we have all of these fossil emissions still around. We really wanted to dig into these human-driven biogenic emissions, and with our new publication, we're reviewing what are their sources, what gases are important, what kind of volumes are we talking about, and then also looking a little bit into how we expect these to develop in the future. If we want to achieve durable net zero, we need to correct the course that we're on and really transition to a scenario where we're increasingly matching the amount of fossil emissions with permanent removals and biogenic emissions with temporary nature-based solutions. So that means progressively stopping using temporary removals like forest credits to neutralize fossil emissions, so for example from sectors like aviation, and at the same time we need to do a much better job at addressing biogenic emissions, and there's really still a lot of them. With this publication we found out that there's currently around 9 times more human-caused biogenic emissions than there are temporary removals. So it looks like a lot of these emissions are going to stick around, and we have huge amounts of them right now. So there is and absolutely will be a need for temporary removals that can remove and store carbon. This publication includes a preliminary review of the policy frameworks in the EU that are important for this topic, and also looking at their current limitations. And so what we're already starting to see is there's an unresolved policy gap for repurposing and expanding the amount of temporary removals so that they can match the volumes of biogenic emissions that there will be in the future. And a big piece of this is that we lack the right pricing mechanisms for biogenic emissions, and also we lack the incentives to neutralize them with temporary removals. And this is why, understandably, temporary removal developers are quite concerned about the lack of demand for these methods in the future. So with this publication, we're pulling together sources of biogenic emissions and looking at their projected trends to show this massive need for temporary CDR. And this mapping of emissions can inform subsequent policy designs that would be able to account for the realities of these emitting sectors. So next, we need to create policies and markets that link biogenic emissions and temporary removals together. I think that our ultimate goal should be to create the missing incentives to expand the amount of temporary removals that we're doing, following a like-for-like approach, working towards a durable net zero.